Welcome to Father Matt's Bible Studies and Sermons videos and podcast. In today's Bible study, we study the Pentateuch, beginning with Genesis and continuing with Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. God bless you and hope you enjoy the Bible study. Let us pray. Almighty God, send your Holy Spirit to be with us in our Bible study today. Bless those who are traveling and those who are packing. All this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
My son is in the air over the Atlantic. Well, he might be over Europe at this point, but he's going to Paris.
Ooh.
And their plane was delayed from 7 p.m. until 3 in the morning. They flew out.
Oof.
So that's they lost some of their day, but hopefully not all of it. Okay, let's slightly review where we were. We last week started the Ten Commandments. We read a little bit before that, though, about the cloud and the trumpet and the thunder and the lightning and the smoke, and there was a little bit of I think confusion in the text itself over when the trumpet is supposed to sound. At one point it says it's going to happen at the beginning, and then it happens at the end, which may be your multiple narratives going on. And then all of a sudden we get the Ten Commandments, and they're sort of separate from what we have been reading and what we will continue to read. There's a bunch of laws. It's usually called the Covenant Code, I think, after this. That when we'll get to them today, you'll see they don't really feel like the same type of they feel like laws in a different way than the Ten Commandments do. And the Ten Commandments, as I said last week, appear in Deuteronomy as well, and they also appear in Exodus. And it has a feeling, and I went a little bit more in depth in this last week, but it has a feeling that they were kind of put in here to match with how they are narrated in Deuteronomy. Nothing wrong with that. So they're the lead in what turns out to be some of the laws, and we'll see as we go through Exodus and then eventually get into Leviticus that there are a lot of laws. But the Ten Commandments are the big ones that stick out. Last week we did the first four. We did I'm the Lord your God, you'll have no other gods. We did make no idols whatsoever, any form. Keep that in mind when we get to the second half of today's class, but no idol in any form. And then we got, don't use the name of the Lord your God in wrongful ways. I talked a little bit about how that was probably swearing, and not like profanity swearing, but like swearing in terms of making an oath. Not to do that. And then the Sabbath is the other one in the first four, and we talked a little bit about that. Does anybody have any comments or questions on what we did last week on the first four commandments before we move on? Okay. Now we get to the shorter ones, and similarly to what I had said last week, I think the best way to think about the Ten Commandments in general, all of them, is they have sort of an original time and place, fairly specific meaning, sometimes really, really specific, that gets extrapolated out and kind of unpacked in a variety of ways. So case in point, the idol one, right, gets turned in. It's originally just making something and falling down and worshiping it. Like it's a literal idol of a deity. And when I teach confirmation class, when people talk about ethics, that gets kind of modified into don't make anything an idol, money or power or this or that, right? The same thing with using the Lord's name. Its original context was probably don't make an oath with the specific name of the Lord and Yahweh in that sense. I swear by Yahweh that I will do X, Y, and Z. And we see that play out in certain places in the Bible. There's a story about a guy named Jephthah who does that. He swears and he ends up it ends up not working out well for him, and that's a whole story about that in the Judges. But essentially, that was the original kind of clean cut, specific version of it, most likely. But that gets turned into don't use profanity, don't do this. It gets kind of moved out. So let's move on to this one, which is uh, Patrice. Can you read? I'd say just verses 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. We'll deal with coveting at the end. Actually, all of them. Do 12 through 17. Just so we'll up there.
Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not cover your neighbor's house. You shall not cover your neighbor's wife, male or female slave, ox, donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
That's it. Great. Okay. So that's the other six. 5 is 12. Can you see my mouse? I don't know if you can.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you're in Roman Catholic world, they divide 10 into 2, and they combine 1 and 2 into 1. Doesn't make any difference. There's 10 either way. So my understanding, and this is pretty much universal in the scholarly world, and so I'm taking everybody's I'm taking them on good faith that this is correct, because it seems not to be so obvious in the actual text. But what all the scholars have said today, for many, many years, is that this honor your father and your mother is probably honoring their graves and keeping, regularly visiting, bringing things to your parents' graves, so that you are recognizing the people that came before you and honoring them not only in life, but also in death. And I think it presupposes that you would treat them well in life as well, but that it continues this, and that you will continue to honor them every day of your life by visiting their graves. When you go to Israel, and some of you have been there, you do see this in practice, right? Where the rocks are there on all the graves, and people are, and you see this all over the world actually, that people visit graves and leave things at it. My understanding of this is that there was a very specific, long-standing cultural practice that this was something that you did, and it's built into the code here from the Ten Commandments as the first of the sort of things that you do to people around you. It obviously gets, unpacked far, far further when people start thinking about regular ethics and what have you. Do your parents well, be nice to your parents, that sort of thing. And actually, even in confirmation class and whatever, it always ends up being, and you should actually be good to everybody. Don't just, stop with your parents. But my understanding is the original context is very much this idea that you visit and maintain and probably bring food or something to your parents' graves on a regular basis, and that's how you honor them. It's not a generic honoring them. It's a really specific type of honoring, and I think that it's the Hebrew word honor that is the key to that. But again, I'm just taking other people's words on that, so I hope you'll take mine. And it is future tense, which is kind of nice, or present tense at least. So your days may be long in the land that your God is giving you, which is different than often what we get, even in Exodus, where sometimes you get past tense things, right? Has given you. So this is given you, which is kind of nice. Any thoughts on the fifth commandment?
Yeah, sometimes when I was growing up, my mother always thought it meant that she was infallible, and that if she gave directions and such, I should always obey blindly at times.
Well, she may have been infallible for all I know, but that's exactly right. How people they take it and they run with it. And there's an example. I'm sure every parent has done this. They run with it for particularly helpful to themselves reasons, right? Like the fifth commandment is honor your father and your mother, so clean your room, right? Like that's how it's usually used.
Yeah, because I remember once hearing also, and I'm getting a little bit ahead here, in St. Paul's epistle to the Ephesians, he does say, honor thy father and thy mother, but he also says, parents, provoke not your children to wrath, but
Right.
raise them in the Christian way.
Right. Well, again, it gets unpacked in different ways. The original context is probably, again, everything I've read forever on this is probably that it's visit their graves and what have you. And again, if you've been to Israel, that's a very important part of the culture, and there's other things tied up into it, but this is one of them. So anything else on the fifth commandment? Okay. 13. There is a note on 13, which is probably or kill, if I was going to guess. No. Or kill. Again, my understanding, my Hebrew is not that good, but my understanding is the Hebrew word here is murder and not kill. And there are two different words. One is kill and one is murder. And this, in its original context, is probably very much you shall not murder. And why do we know the difference between that? All you have to do is keep reading. Within the next chapter, there's a whole bunch of things that talk about the death penalty for this, that, and the other thing. So it, in its context, it doesn't make sense if it's kill. And in the original Hebrew, it's murder. Now, when does that get modified and turned into kill? Because it's the King James that everybody recalls when they recall "Thou shalt not kill," and it's in the translation that the distinction between a word for murder and the word for kill gets combined into one word, and I think it's in Latin. It may be in Greek, but originally it's probably, almost certainly, murder, not kill. And again, as it gets ethically unpacked, as every commandment does, that gets turned into the starting point for arguments against everything from capital punishment to just war and anti-war or pacifism in general, abortion, anything you can think of gets unpacked out of this sixth commandment. But it probably starts with simply plain old murder, and you're not supposed to do it.
Yeah, if I can just toss in there, my son and I had long debates on that, and he actually pulled up a poster of the Ten Commandments, and it's murder. The reason being, in war, you have to kill people, and it's your divine right, if you will, if you're the leader of one of these sects. So they've forgiven you if you wind up killing the enemy. Murder is more personal. Murdering people out of hatred or crime or something like that. So he pulled it up out of his book, which is both English and Hebrew, and it's the word murder.
Yeah, and I mean, from the biblical context, it wouldn't make any sense if it was a blanket prohibition on killing for all sorts of reasons, assuming that's just killing humans. We've already had a battle. Remember Moses holding up his hands? And we're going to have more battles. We also did just have the whole Exodus and the Red Sea where the Lord wiped out all the Egyptians, right? We're going to have more of those things. We're going to get into the promised land at some point, and there's going to be many battles. Jericho is one of them, right? And as we'll see in the next section, one of the first things that pops up in terms of the covenant code, and it's not unique to this, it's all over Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, is certain things, the punishment for doing certain things is the death penalty, full stop. But again, when I teach confirmation class, and I'm talking to high school kids, I'll start with murder, but we always work our way into other ethical things. And character assassination is usually something I end up talking a little bit about with the kids and that sort of thing. So they've always been a platform, and this is one that has a lot of platformer uses. All right, next is you shall not commit adultery. That's pretty straightforward. The original context hasn't changed much, right? It was adultery back then. It is adultery now. It too is used to to, unpack it in all sorts of different ways, in this and that, but it's probably strict. Do not have sex with a married person, or if you are a married person, outside of marriage, if that makes sense. It probably is a two-way street in that sense. All right. Any comments on murder, killing, adultery, honoring your father and your mother? Okay. You shall not steal. That, pretty straightforward. Then and now, don't steal. It doesn't say don't rob a bank. That's stealing. It doesn't say don't pirate video games. That's stealing, right? Stealing is stealing is stealing. And that gets unpacked ethically pretty easily as well. False witness against your neighbor. In its original context, and I think most people know this, but in its original context, the false witness this is a legal thing. This is like don't bear false witness in court against your neighbor, right? Don't do it. This gets turned into everything up to and including don't lie, right? It gets unpacked like that. But the original context, similarly to the one about using the Lord's name wrongfully, is that's an oath. This is probably almost certainly in some sort of legal context, that you do not lie as a false witness against somebody. And the last one is coveting. Literally in every confirmation class I have ever taught, we read this, and the first question. Anybody know what the first question is on the 10th commandment from every confirmation class? Just take a guess. What does covet mean?
It means to envy what other people have.
Well, that's their question. No, I know what it means, but that's their question, right? And that's what I say. It's to envy. It's like a strong form of envy. And you can probably double click on this and it will give us a meaning. Covet. Yearn to possess, especially belonging to another. I covet one of their bubble jet printers. Nobody has ever coveted a bubble jet printer. Let me say that. One covets maybe a photocopier, but not a bubble jet printer. All right. And in this context, it's not a bubble jet printer. It's a neighbor's house. It's obvious big things, right? And interestingly, the other ones haven't, it wasn't like don't steal a mailbox, don't steal money, don't steal an idol, don't steal gold. It was just don't do it. This is more specific. You shall not covet your neighbor's house, or your neighbor's wife, or your neighbor's slaves, or your oxes or donkeys, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Interestingly, two things in here. One, we already had an adultery, and we already had stealing, right? So it seems that, well, we've already kind of done this. And this is sort of like, look, don't even think about doing it. And what's interesting is the last commandment and the first one, right, kind of bookend the whole thing, right? You are, in general, supposed to have no other gods, and then it works its way through some things about what that means. And then at the end, it ends with this kind of blanket thing. Don't even think about doing something that might lead to these other things that we just talked about. And in the middle is this one about parents and honoring them, which, if you're honest, doesn't match up with anything else because it sort of is a family thing, whereas these other ones are communal things with your neighbor, and the ones before are divine things. So there's a nice order to it, that you've got 1 and 10, and then you've got some stuff in the that kind of unpack 1 and then reverse unpack 10, and then in the middle is this kind of thing about your family and your mother and your father, which I think is nice. Any questions or comments on the 10 Commandments? I will be honest. Every single person, I think, certainly in this Bible study, probably on earth, has broken this commandment some way, shape, or form, even if it's not ox or donkey or slaves or this or that, because the anything right there, right? All of us have at some point coveted our neighbor's bubble jet printer, or our neighbor's lawnmower, or our neighbor's nice car or house or whatever. So from an ethical standpoint, this and the first one are wonderful starting points to try to keep you from getting into the other ones. Okay. Anything on the 10 Commandments before we move on?
I just wanted to say, when I was in Sunday school, that we were given examples of it in one class, and they had an example of the ninth commandment, bear false witness against the neighbor. Two people, person was missing something, and the other person said, well, I saw somebody over by your locker or such. So that the speculation was that they may have been responsible.
Right.
They didn't have any hard evidence to
Right.
back it up.
Well, that's not exactly a court case, but it's probably not that far off if you're in school, right? So, getting in trouble with the principal. All right, let's move on. We're going to do 18 to 21, which is suddenly a little different. So, JD, can you read 18 to 21?
Sure. When all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain, it's going to move, smoking, they were afraid, and trembled and stood at a distance and said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid, for God has come only to test you and to put the fear of him upon you, so that you do not sin." Then the people stood at a distance, while Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was.
All right. It just picks up where we left off before the Ten Commandments, for what that's worth. And this, from the various narrators that we've talked about, this picks up with, there were two that were talking about the mountain and the theophany, the appearance of God. One of them was that the trumpet would be at the end. One of them was the trumpet was going to be at the beginning. One had smoke, one had lightning. This one is the one that talked about the test, for what that's worth. We had that a couple of times, that they were going to be tested. And now we're going to get a bunch of laws that some of them seem to overlap with what we just had. From, if you're going to pull the narrators apart, this doesn't need to have included the Ten Commandments, which we just had. If you're not, and you're going to read it in terms of how the canon functions, which is perfectly fine, that these just follow up immediately afterwards. What it does is it separates out the Ten Commandments as something special, which is kind of cool. And it begins what really will be a series of different laws about how to do things, and they play out. And we'll see right from the get-go, these laws that we're going to read don't always match up exactly with how the Ten Commandments stated things. But in any event, from a narrative perspective, it's a little weird, because like Moses just kind of went in and told, if you go back right before the Ten Commandments, the last thing he did, different narrator, right? So there's all this stuff. The Lord says, do this, do that. Don't let the people come in. And so Moses goes down and tells them, and it's the Ten Commandments. And then after what JD just read, Moses goes back in. He goes back into the darkness. So you've got kind of two different things going on, for what that's worth. Any comments on this? Okay. This chunk from 22 on is called the Covenant Code. It goes on for a couple of chapters. I think we can probably get through, if not all of it, most of it today, or at least half of it, and we'll see. JD, can you keep reading and read 22 to the end of the chapter?
The Lord said to Moses, "Thus you shall say to the Israelites, you have seen for yourselves how I spoke with you from heaven. You shall not make gods of silver alongside me, nor shall you make for yourself gods of gold. You need make for me only an altar of earth, and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your offerings of well-being, your sheep and your oxen. In every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. But if you make for me an altar of stone, do not build it of hewn stones, For if you use a chisel upon it, you profane me. You shall not go up by steps to my altar, so that your nakedness may not be exposed on it.
Okay. Um, I have some things to say about that. For the record, we've now entered the part of the Bible that we don't read in church very often. like, like, and it will get even more. We don't read it in church very often in a couple of minutes. So, one, okay, this is sort of the preface to what is called the covenant code. And there's a reason for that. There's a big covenant at the end, and it kind of is packaged in this. So it starts with this. You're going to, the Lord is talking to Moses, tell the Israelites this, that, you saw me from heaven now, and this is the agreement. Like, you've seen this, and so these are the things you're not going to do. And it turns out the front end of the covenant is not just that you've seen how I spoke with you from heaven. It will turn out over and over again. I took you out of Egypt, therefore you must do these things. I've already done my part of the bargain or the covenant, and you must do X, Y, and Z. So right from the get-go, there's a slight disagreement, not huge, but it's slight, between the second commandment above and this. It's not, above it was don't do any idols whatsoever. Now it's gods of silver alongside me, nor gods of gold. What's unclear here, and when we get to the golden calf, we'll see some of this. What's unclear here is whether you're allowed to or not at this point make yourself an idol of the Lord. Now, we know you can't from earlier, but in its original context, that may not have been the case. You may have been allowed to, just not of other gods. So there's a difference between what was above, which is nothing at all, no idols, absolutely nothing, not even no images, and now this is of other gods. That's the distinction, and also of silver and gold here. 2, you need make for me only an altar of earth and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your offerings of well-being. So these are the two types of regular. This gives you a good hint into what regular in your average every town worship probably looked like, which is you can make an altar locally, and you can do your burnt offerings and your offerings of well-being. The burnt offerings, they were things that you brought, and essentially you'd make this meal and the Lord would show up and eat it, right? And that was kind of the regular routine in this and that. And, you sacrifice your sheep and your oxen. And here's the key. Every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. It's pretty clear that you can build an altar anywhere you want, right? You just have to build an altar made of earth. And, if you decide to make one of stone, that's okay, I guess. Just don't make it of hewn stones, because don't use a chisel. So you can stack stones, I guess that's how that is, but you can't chisel things. So it's got to be of dirt or earth or stone, or I guess it can be natural, right? If you think about it from that sense, you could find a nice altar-shaped rock somewhere that you could use, but you can't cut it, and then there's multiple types, and also it can't have steps. And I have no idea what this means at all, this nakedness thing, no clue. But my guess is something about steps. Maybe people could... I don't know. I'm sure we can all guess something about looking up skirts or whatever, or tunics or this and that. But I honestly have no idea what that line is about. What's important here is that it gives you a window into a regular cultic sort of way of doing things that clearly continues well into other parts of the Bible, all the way up when you get to Samuel, right? The story about Samuel, here am I, Lord, right? And he's in the temple at Shiloh. He's not in the temple in Jerusalem because there isn't one, right? That hasn't been built yet. So there were local places that people could worship, and it looks like from the beginning you could kind of do it however you wanted, but here's a couple of basic restrictions on how you worship. But you can do this locally. And you just don't have idols of silver and gold of other gods. You can do an altar of earth or of stone as long as you're not cutting into it and no steps. But you can do it anywhere. And wherever you do it, I'll come to you and I will bless you. So this is a positive thing. And I got to close my curtain because I can't even see myself anymore. All right. How's that? Better? Okay. Any questions on this? Comments? Anything? Okay. If anybody ever figures out this nakedness thing, I'd love to know. Google it on your own time. Okay, Exodus 21. Charlotte, can you read 21, 1 to 11?
Yes. Okay. 1 to 11 on 21. Okay. The law concerning slaves. These are the ordinances that you shall set before them. When you buy a male Hebrew slave, he shall serve 6 years, but in the 7th he shall go out a free person, without debt. If he comes in single, he shall go out single. If he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. If this master gives him a wife, and she bears him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be her master's, and he shall go out alone. But if the slave declares, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go out a free person. Then his master shall bring him before God. He shall be brought to the door or the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him for life. Yuck. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, he shall not go out as the male slaves do. If she does not please her master, who designated her for himself, then he shall let her be redeemed. He shall have no right to sell her to a foreign people, since he has dealt unfairly with her. If he designates her for his son, he shall deal with her as with a daughter. If he takes another wife to himself, he shall not diminish the food, clothing, or marital rights of the first wife. And if he does not do these 3 things for her, she shall go out without debt, without payment of money.
Great. Okay. Again, these are things we don't read in church, right? Like this is interesting that the second set of laws in the covenant code following how to build an altar is about how you treat Hebrew slaves, not foreign slaves, right? That's a whole different thing that's not even mentioned here, but this is how you treat slaves that are slaves in your own people and group, which, again, think of the context on some level. We will get later, there's kind of it probably will be next week or in 2 weeks when we resume, but we will get a reference to the book of the covenant at the end of this. And it's like, oh, suddenly there's a whole book, right? So think of this in terms of, in its original context, they're out, he's at the mountain, and there's apparently enough time to write a book that is taken here. Also, original context. They've just left Egypt. And in our entire canonical, as it is in the Bible narrative, they were slaves there. And the first thing they talk about is, well, you were slaves there. Anyway, this is how you treat your own slaves in your own group, which is so messed up. Like, the whole thing is very messed up if you think about it. But it presupposes, that there was slavery not just among foreigners, but very much among the people of Israel. And right up front, one of the most important things is apparently how you treat your slaves. And so we'll go into some detail on this. First, this is the Hebrew slave. This is not the foreigner. Second, there's a Sabbath thing set up here, right? So how do you get a Hebrew slave is the first thing. There were 2 types of slavery, at least back then. One was kind of like debt slavery. And so if you couldn't pay your bills, you could sell yourself to somebody. And this says, well, you can only do that for 6 years, right? So this is a positive thing in that sense of you can only go into debt slavery for 6 years. But in the 7th year, you've got to go free, right? And the key here is without debt, right? So that tells you what type of slavery it is. You sell yourself or somebody to whom you've already been sold. sells you to somebody else, but you exit after 6 years without debt. It's not overtly linked to the Sabbath above, but I think you could probably link it in your heads pretty easily. Then there's this whole other thing. If you come in single, you get to go out single. If you come in married, then your wife goes in and out with you. However, if you get a wife while you're a slave and you have children, the wife and the children stay and you go out alone, which is an interesting thing if you think about that, right? So how important was the family unit? Obviously not as important as the person keeping slaves, right? Well, but what if I like my wife and my children? Well, I can choose to be a slave forever, right? I can choose to be a slave forever. There probably was also some way that you could buy your wife and children from out of slavery, but good luck with that since you got yourself into that position in the first place. So that's fairly specific in terms of what this looks like. And there was a sign, right? You go to the doorpost, that's probably of the temple, right? You bring him before God or of the local shrine or whatever. So you brought the slave to the local shrine at the doorpost and you pierced the person's ear, and that's the sign that now you're a slave for life. If that makes you uncomfortable, let's keep going. When a man sells his daughter as a slave, that's like the next line. Okay, so say you're in debt, but not that much debt. So you sell your daughter as a slave, right? She shall not go out as the male slaves do. That probably means out to work, right? So what is she doing? Well, if she does not please her master, she's a concubine. Essentially, she has been sold to be a concubine. We've seen that already, right? Abraham had two, or at least one. He had, what's her name? Hagar, right? Abraham had one, and that was Sarah's slave. And we saw that also with Jacob, right? Jacob had two wives, Rachel and Rebekah, and each of them had slaves. And they were... and he had children through them, right? So you see this playing out in the law code too, right? So she is designated for the person who just bought her for himself. He shall let her be redeemed. So you can redeem this person, right? You can buy her back out of slavery. And he can't sell her to a foreign people, right? Because why? Because she's a Hebrew slave, right? So she gets to stay as a concubine in our people. And she's got certain rights, even though she's a slave. And if that person who bought her designates her as a concubine for his son, then he has to treat her as if it were his own daughter. So again, she's treated well. And you saw this with Jacob as well, with the concubines that he had, that the children born of the concubines were treated exactly as if they were his regular full-blown sons, right? Which they are. They're part of the 12 tribes. Now, if he, the son, takes another wife for himself, he shall not diminish the food, clothing, or marital rights of the first wife. Note, N, of her, right? She's not really his wife. The Hebrew is of her. It's unfortunate that they've put his wife in here because she's not really his wife. She's his concubine, right? So if he takes another wife, or if he takes a woman to be his wife, okay, so he can have both of them, but he still has to feed her, clothe her, and do the marital rights thing with her, right? So she's still in this. And if he doesn't do these three things, he's got to do all three of those, right? She gets to go free without debt, right? So if he decides, I don't want to feed you, she gets to go free. If he decides, I don't want to give you clothing, she gets to go free. And if he or his new wife says you don't get to have sex with her, she gets to go free. So the first two laws that we have, or chunks of laws that we have, deal with how to build an altar and then how to deal with Hebrew slaves. Kind of interesting. Any thoughts on this?
Yes. Once she's thrown out, once she's out, how does she live? How does she take care of herself?
Great question. No answer on that.
Okay.
Great question. She probably ends up working at the local shrine as a temple prostitute or something like that. Right?
Right.
Like, because she's already, she's already gone through the ringer, so to speak, right? So, yeah, great question. There's two things here. Probably more than two things, but think about this from obviously there is a giant disconnect between how we understand people and slavery and basic rights and what have you today, and this has gotta be 3,000-4,000 years ago. We didn't look at it. We will next week. This Hammurabi thing. I'll say a tiny bit about this. There were law codes all over the place that predate this and also come out after it. They tended to be fairly similar. And what is different about this is that this is, not the king saying something. This is God saying something. But a couple of things to remember in here is one, and this plays out in our local society as well, right? Citizens have more rights than non-citizens, right? This is how this starts. So you're a citizen, essentially, right? If you're a Hebrew slave, or when a man, this is taken for granted, that this is not like some foreigner, when any of us sells our daughter into local slavery, which apparently happened, there are certain rights. That's what this is doing. It's giving rights to the slave. It's not the other way around, right? It doesn't tell you if you can beat up a slave or this or that, or how you have to treat a slave, and that probably was not real good. But it is applying certain rights that other societies may or may not have had, for what that's worth. But the thing that is, I think, worth noting here is that it's this is the rights for our type of people, and we're not even going to get into how we treat other types of people, which is probably far, far worse, for what that's worth, right? Which has gone throughout history, that we treat ours better and everybody else can whatever. And number two, the disconnect in terms of how far away it is in terms of how we think and this and that, I think makes it a little challenging, to say the least, to remember that in some way, shape, or form, this is providing positive rights to people in an environment where certain things are taken for granted, if that makes sense. All right. Any other questions on or comments on this? Only because I said we'd get there. Do we have enough time to? No, we don't have enough time to do the next one. Well, let's jump into the Hammurabi thing. We'll pick up at verse 12 next week. I said that, murder versus kill. You will discover in this next section that the death penalty makes its way into the law pretty much immediately. But the Code of Hammurabi, this may have a helpful note here, is probably worth reading. So this is from Hammurabi, right? And this is an example of, if a child should strike his father, they shall cut off his hand. If an awilu, I don't know who that is, should blind the eye of another awilu, they should blind his eye. There's eye for an eye, right? If he should break the bones of another awilu, they shall break his bones. Still eye for an eye. If you should blind the eye of a commoner, or break the bone of a commoner, he shall weigh and deliver 60 shekels. Suddenly something's different, right? The awilu is probably the citizen, and if you're not a citizen, you have to pay a money fine. We will see that in the next chunk that we read of this. But let me read the Code of Hammurabi. So the Code of Hammurabi, written around 1755 BCE, the BCE, same thing. The Law Code of Hammurabi is one of the longest preserved inscriptions from ancient Mesopotamia. The code contains almost 300 laws that addresses aspect of daily life, and almost all of the laws follow the same format. If X happens, then Y will be the conflict. This is the basic formula found in Exodus 20 and following. Note, here we go. An awilu is a male or female slave of high status. not of slave, but of high status, right? So, so the wealthy or the citizens or whatever it is, they get a different set of rights, for what that's worth. Let's see. That's just regular other notes. So let's go back, if it lets us back. All right, let's take a break because it's 8:45 here. Next week we will deal with laws concerning violence and what have you. And let me stop sharing. It's actually not next week. I'm away I'm around next week. So next week we'll deal with laws. In 2 weeks I'm not here. So I will be here next week. We will meet. Next week is Ash Wednesday on Wednesday. So if you come to Bible study, which I know you all will, it will be the beginning of Lent, and you can start by you can start Lent by thinking about an eye for an eye and capital punishment and all that other stuff. So, any final questions on this? Okay, interesting stuff, right? It's strange that you start off with this, but again, we don't read much of this in church. We read the Ten Commandments, but we don't tend to read the things afterwards. All right, God bless.
Thanks.
Have a good week. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
You